I think it's already painfully obvious that Star Trek Picard's visuals are basically just a collage of other inspirations. Ironically, it borrows from almost everything except Star Trek. And among the things that it has lifted are its holographic computer terminals, which have become ubiquitous in modern sci-fi. And I'll tell you why. It's because these sorts of displays are a simple way to add a sense of futuristic technology for almost no effort and virtually no cost. Just film a plate of your actor waving their hands around like a total weirdo and add visual nonsense in post. Done. Something I filmed in 60 seconds in my apartment is suddenly big budget sci-fi. And just as an aside, these graphics were literally procedurally generated by my computer. These sorts of visuals aren't even designed per se. That's how low effort these effects really are. And this stuff is in fact so ubiquitous that you can find dozens of stock clips that have virtually the same effect. This isn't some cool, unique sci-fi visual design element. This is tired cliche. So it's no surprise that almost every science fiction property has adopted these sorts of displays. Of course, that's completely ignoring that they would be a nightmare to use. Imagine using something like this on anything except a dark, featureless background. The eye strain would drive you crazy. And of course, imagine waving your arms around for more than a few seconds. This is the sort of technology that, if it existed, would disappear almost immediately because it's just a pain to use. Now, there are legitimate uses for a holographic display, such as conveying information that is best understood in 3 dimensions. But for these sorts of 2-dimensional panels hovering in the air, why on earth would this be more practical to interact with than a physical console? But that's not really what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about why we're seeing this in Star Trek. Star Trek already has a well-developed visual style, and as a very clean, structured, and almost minimal franchise, it notably lacks these sorts of goofy displays. Now, of course, Star Trek does have holographic displays, and even in their extremely rare occurrences, they're usually conveying actual 3-dimensional data that is best communicated with a hologram. But at any rate, I'm not saying that this sort of technology couldn't exist in the Star Trek world. Holographic technology is insanely, almost ludicrously advanced in Star Trek, and that's actually why I have a problem with all of this. Holograms in Star Trek aren't like the holograms in other sci-fi, like incorporeal, transparent, flickery, glowy things. Holograms in Star Trek look like real objects, and they feel like real objects. Star Trek is a world where almost anything can be holographic, even a pair of functional lungs in the case of one episode of Star Trek Voyager. The possibilities for holographic technology are literally endless, and yet the designers on Star Trek Picard decided to give us this tired, unimaginative version of the future, completely ignoring the technology in the Star Trek world. I'm sure some people who are unfamiliar with the technology in Star Trek think that this is some modern, slick interpretation of the future, but really it's a massive step backward. We were way beyond this back in 1987. How much cooler could holographic displays be in Star Trek if there was some creativity behind it? I imagine a bridge with no apparent controls at all. Maybe a confused Picard can look around and say, "How do you control this ship?" And Captain Rios comes in all smug and sits down like, "You haven't seen a holographic console, old man?" And a console materializes in front of him. That would be cool. There's so much flexibility here. You could easily rearrange the entire bridge, especially if the chairs were holographic as well. Why not? If we can have holographic people interacting with the real world, why not chairs? And individual stations could be customized on the fly. Need an extra panel? Just speak it into existence. So with this understanding, maybe Captain Rios is the kind of guy who prefers tactile controls. He obviously likes to fly his ship with 3-dimensional holographic controls in the show, but maybe let's not do something that's straight out of a Marvel movie. How about he swapped out his boring modern interface for a retro pilot setup with floating instrument panels, a floating joystick, and throttle? Now we literally have the exact same concept, flying your ship with floating holograms. But this time it's actually using the full capacity of Star Trek holographic technology and finally leaves some kind of unique visual impact. And this sort of flexibility gives us other opportunities too, like when Picard takes control of La Sirena, instead of awkwardly using unfamiliar controls, he can say, "Computer, give me a Starfleet helm console circa 2368, and voila, Picard is back in his element. It's a super simple visual that could make for an awesome moment. But really, I just wanted to communicate that idea that I had. Star Trek Picard could be so much better if its designers used Star Trek as an inspiration, rather than virtually everything else. Star Trek is incredibly unique and offers so many possibilities, if you're willing to use them.